Only the Good Survive is a movie about a group of friends who undertake a heist that goes horribly wrong. It leaves Bree, who's one of the members of the heist, in the custody of the local sheriff. And there's a back and forth between the two that kind of carries the movie. So only the good survive. This immediately, it threw me off because I started it and I was in the kitchen, like making a sandwich or something. And I thought in the beginning, you know how now there's like 8 or 9 studios and production
Oh yeah.
companies. So there's all this animation going on in the beginning. And then I looked up and I was like, holy shit, that was the movie.
Yep.
Completely threw me off. So pretty cool start, I gotta say. Not cool like, yeah, that's the most amazing thing that I saw. Cool like, okay, I gotta pay attention.
Oh, totally. Uh this that like screamed South by Southwest movie to me, actually. Like that was like
Totally. It was like their
yeah.
beginning thing, like it's their thing, and like the logo goes off and then it just says South by Southwest.
Yeah.
Keep Austin weird.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this was oozing Austin vibes,
Totally.
for sure. And but yeah, that kind of I like the way it kicked off. I
I do.
and to speak, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what you have to say about it, because it's pervasive through the entire movie, and
Yeah.
it bleeds in and out of scenes a few times, the animation. And I thought, as far as all that goes, that was one of the more effective uses of that kind of style I've seen in a good long time.
Yeah, I'm glad we might as well talk about it right off the bat, and
Yeah,
then we'll get into the movie. I
sure.
thought the animation, like that beginning part, was really cool. Like I wasn't expecting it. I had to rewind it so I can actually make sure that I didn't miss anything. And
Yeah.
it's really good looking artwork.
Mhm.
The effectiveness, I think, was hit or miss. Like
Sure.
it never didn't look good. It always looked really good, but sometimes it kind of broke. Like I don't know if it's immersion or flow, but it
Mm.
just didn't seem to fit the scene. But then there
That,
were
that I will agree with.
yeah, it just kind of it caught me off guard. It was jarring.
Sure. Yeah,
But then there
definitely.
was sometimes when and there in particular there's a moment where like the art is over Bria's her eyes and her mouth and her face,
Yes, yes.
and it was and the first time was amazing, and the as it did it a
Yeah.
couple did it like 2 or 3 times, it
Yeah.
always looked cool, but I was ready for it. But man, that
That
first time
first
was
time, completely
yeah,
agree.
you never forget your first time.
Exactly.
And man, it was great. Like
It was.
I would like we'll get into tone and
Hmm.
how wacky this movie is because it doesn't sound wacky at all. That
Doesn't.
it gets really crazy. But the art was I don't think that it would have been a good idea to remove it if that meant like even though it didn't always work, I will say that they could have used it more effectively.
Sure.
um, I think it added to the overall feel of the movie, and it was a very, very important part of the movie.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the sometimes the nature of it being kind of jarring and not what you expected, it plays into the total theme of the entire movie. And I think that was how they were trying to use it, in kind of a playful way in at times, because this whole movie is like, it's really about sleight of hand. And
Yes.
and I thought how the movie kind of kicks off with this, it's really misdirection, man. Like this movie is all about misdirection. And I think the way it kicks off with that animation and then kind of goes into like it did the first act, take you off guard, because it took me off guard.
Oh yeah, you're like the descriptions that you're using. I would never have thought of. Those are really, really, really good ways to describe this movie.
Sure.
Yeah, like the entire movie caught me off guard. So it starts with the interrogations, and we'll get into
Hmm.
that right now because I think that those parts really highlight a pair of performances. But yeah, it did because it's actually like almost immediate. Like when there's the back and forth in the interrogation room, it immediately caught me off guard because I was expecting something that was very serious and almost like a usual suspects like type
Sure.
situation, and it wasn't. Like it was comical. It was really fun. There was this back and forth, like they were exchanging barbs and witticisms almost with each other. Like there was like this feeling out, like they were trying to figure out who was lying, and the audience too. You don't know who to trust, what's going on here. And spoiler alert, we'll talk about some things that happen, but we won't ruin anyone's enjoyment. And there are quite a number of twists in this little movie.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, like it comes to pass that there are in fact some deaths in this movie, so you have to figure out who, why, when, and how. And yeah, like and then the first act, it's kind of silly, and they're putting together the heist team, and it's done with these little sketch like scenes
Oh,
almost.
I'm so glad you said it. It was this it was like a sketch comedy show sometimes.
Yeah, and that like that's how, like you said, the first act goes. And then there's this they break into the house, and then there's this discovery that's a blew my mind. Like it was, did not expect them to find what they found. And then it becomes, at this point, like it becomes less of a sketch and more of a straight on movie, but it's not jokey anymore. It's like a horror movie. And then there's the occasional art, which kind of draws it back into the silliness. But yeah, like to answer your question, very long winded. Yes, I was completely thrown off by the first act.
Yeah, no, I thought this movie was pretty. It did some things that I think would normally kind of piss me off.
Yeah.
If I'm being quite honest with you. And I think we've talked about it, how some movies in the past few weeks and months, if they kind of shift on us, and it either works or it doesn't. And this whole kind of sketchy vibe that, like you said, it kind of transitions to this like kind of straightforward movie after that, but it keeps jumping to this back and forth, which is downright, like almost like a Funny or Die kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And it that kept me engaged for and it was almost like I didn't know which I liked more. Like I liked when they would cut to what happened, and like the character development of these crazy people, which, like, as the movie goes on, you get to learn that all these people are way crazier than you even thought they were, and
Right.
and I like that. I like how they kind of like, they didn't let you fully into the story until like the third act, but they did it in a way that kept you engaged. Stuff that would normally piss me off, but this is somehow worked.
Yeah, and big props to writer director Dutch Southern, because
Yeah.
I believe this was his debut.
Wow.
And it's a total DIY feel. And to be perfectly blunt, I'm pretty sure every single idea he had, it's in this movie. and to be even more honest, it doesn't all work, because like there's a part early on when the sheriff tells Bria, he tells her like, I bet you're wondering now if this is a horror or a comedy. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
totally
right.
true. That was pretty cool. It
Yeah.
doesn't quite work at the end when a character says, I know none of this makes sense. Like,
Oh,
really bad line. And
yeah.
no, it didn't make sense when we'll get into all of that. But I've seen a lot of movies, and we've seen a lot of movies on here,
Yeah.
where they throw everything at the wall, or we say that it needs better editing, or it's
more common than you'd think.
Yeah, there's a germ of a good idea in
Right.
there, and it totally ruins your experience. This is the rarest of movies where every single idea seems to have been left in. Nothing was on the cutting floor, I don't think. And
No.
it ended up being very enjoyable, like super entertaining. And yeah, you're right. I should have hated it, and it shouldn't work, but you might have said it. It might be the characters that pull this one out.
It totally is. It totally is. The sheriff is such a quirky weirdo.
Yes.
And our star, Bree or whatever, she is a total weirdo. And then the three like heist member guys, like they all had this like fucking shitty fucking 90s movie vibe to them all, but for totally wildly different reasons. I loved when we got their backstories and like saw how fucking crazy they were. Like, it is on the strength of really wacky characters that a really loose story with a bunch of shit that you're just expected to have followed, it holds it together. It's exactly what you said. That is what keeps this, and the performances are good. These actors, they as I say, bought in, and you can really tell.
Yeah, the performances are great. Sydney Flanagan, who was in, gosh, I hope I get this movie right. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which was it premiered at Sundance a few years ago. It's a very, very, very serious movie about abortion. And she's really, and like critically, she won all these awards for it and stuff. She's also in a punk band called Star Juice, which
Oh, great
kind of,
name.
yeah, great name, and it kind of fits her character, her personality, basically. But her performance in this movie was amazing. Her back and
Yeah,
forth with the sheriff, Fred Weller.
yeah,
Like they have this amazing back and forth. Like the chemistry between the two. Honestly, their chemistry is better than the chemistry between her and her boyfriend. I thought, which was fun in it itself.
yeah.
But the back and forth with her and the sheriff was so well written, and it was so good. And it's like you said, it was sometimes during the movie where there's actual action going on, I kind of longed for those interrogation scenes, right?
Right.
Because those are what propelled the actual plot.
Yeah, yeah. Completely agree with that. That's 100% fact, and it has so much to do with like like her. There was just moments where they were kind of just deadpan and like lines delivered to each other, and then they'd kind of just stare at each other. And that's like good directing to kind of let that beat just kind of hang in the air before like so if something else happened. And yeah, I really looked forward to those scenes. And so when we get to like, that's luckily that is like a big chunk of this movie.
Yes.
But when we get to the third act and that we kind of get away from that, I thought the movie, that's where I thought the movie was like, oh fuck, like you were saying, like this is where like all of these ideas hit the fan. And
Yeah.
now it's kind of like we're swimming in the soup of only the good.
Yeah, exactly. And and I also give this movie a lot of credit because we've talked about how movies are like Pulp Fiction is a huge influence, and you can see it in this movie. Usual Suspects I talked about earlier, but it never feels like it's a copy of like a lot of movies. They feel like they're ripping from it basically, but this is its own thing. I will say by the third act, when one of the characters mentioned like none of it makes sense, I was annoyed by like the last 10 minutes. Like it did
Yeah.
lose me. It gets a little too wild, a little too twisty. And then like it actually had this really cool story going on where there's like this lesson that yeah, only the good do survive. I mean, your definition of good might differ from mine, but yeah. But
Correct.
then there's this twist where it's like this super happy hunky-dory and they wrap a bow on everything and very forced compared because the rest of the story as silly and it's fun. It's like this is not a dour movie at no matter how many people die. This is a lighthearted movie throughout. The end kind of loses that charm to me.
I couldn't agree more. Like this movie built up so much goodwill for itself, grounding, home, and then it kind of just trips and kind of falls on its fucking face a little bit. But it's one of those things where, like I said, it kind of built up some goodwill, and so I kind of, as the audience member, which is we're just guys who watch movies here,
Yes.
I, I was still with it to finish it off. Did I like all the sugar sweetness of the end? No, not at all. This had some brutality to it, in a
Yeah.
really kind of fun way. Like that had, like you said, like had you could feel this movie's roots, and I felt like the end was a little bit of a fucking cop out, and um,
Yeah.
I fucking hated the fucking final shot. Like of all, as much as I loved this movie, the final shot, like you said, it kind of kind of ticked me off. But the movie overall was a good experience. But gosh, that didn't fuck.